approach everything with an abundant mindset, which I think makes a really huge difference. I also think of money as a tool versus a goal. So money is a tool that will allow me to live a certain kind of life. And so when I work with people, I want to understand where they're coming from, because that does shape how they think about money. I also want to think about where they're going, because then we have a goal. And then we think about this tool that's going to enable us to get there. So let's have that abundant mindset. I love the immigrant mindset. I call it our superpower, where people see problems, we see opportunities.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unmuted Moments. If you're joining us for the very first time, special welcome to you. So Unmuted Moments is a podcast exploring the journey to finding and owning your voice, both from a professional standpoint and just how we show up in life in general. I'm your host, Ahis, and today I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Jane Mepham to the show. So Jane is a certified financial planner, that's CFP, and she's the founder of Elgon Financial Advisors, where she helps immigrants and foreign nationals build wealth while navigating different complexities of the U.S. financial system. She's originally from Kenya. She moved to the States over 20 years ago, first building a career in tech before pivoting to financial planning. So today, she guides immigrants and visa holders in pursuing the American dream while navigating all the different tax pitfalls. She's also the co-host of a podcast called the International Money Cafe Podcast. In this episode, we'll explore the intersection of immigration and wealth building and how navigating finances as an immigrant is both a challenge, but also an opportunity to find your voice and build a legacy for the next generation. So, Jane, welcome to the show.
That's a great intro. So really appreciate it. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of your episodes on LinkedIn, and the more I kept reading into it, the more I thought, oh, I'd love for the opportunity to just come and share my journey and what I do. So thank you.
Thank you. I've been following your content on LinkedIn as well. We both share an interest in trying to uplift immigrants, despite it's a very challenging immigration environment that we find ourselves.
True.
But wherever you are, you know, you can still fight for your dreams and achieve what you want in this country. So let's get right into it. Can you just walk us through your upbringing in Kenya, how that was like, and how did that impact your mindset coming to the States?
I love that you just jumped right into the deep end, but it's fantastic because you do need to know where you're coming from before you know where you're going to. So I grew up in Kenya, outside of Nairobi, in a little village now, and though a couple of us in the family. And growing up, and now you're really making me go back, the thing I remember was it was a very male-dominated society. And my parents, especially my dad, was very, very specific about the fact that he wanted his girls to do well and not to fail in life because they're girls. And so there's a lot of, Jane, if boys can do this, you can do it better. So it started to instill that confidence in us. The other thing I remember learning from them was, like I said, we attended a village school where even something as simple as wearing shoes was considered, oh, you know, that's a biggie, you know what I'm saying? And people would say to my dad, why don't you take your kids to a city school? But what he kept saying to us was, if they're going to succeed here in the village, then I know they can succeed anywhere else. And that, to me, was a big part of saying you can succeed anywhere. You just got to put your mind into it. Obviously, the conditions may not be right. And that's something I really carry with me up to today. And then we can talk about, in terms of finances, the thing I remember him teaching us was, if you can manage 1 shilling, then you'll be able to manage 100. So the idea of start small, know the basics, and then move on. I don't know if that tells you enough, but you want me to say more.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. And for listeners who may not know what shilling is, so shilling is the Kenyan currency. Is that right?
Correct. Thank you. Yes, it is.
Awesome. So how big was your family, and was it mostly girls in your family?
So I got 3 sisters and I had 2 brothers, but one passed away back then. My dad worked in the city. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, so took care of us. And again, being where we grew up, when I say took care of us, it was like a 24-hour job because, you know, you had the laundry, you had the cooking, you had the garden. And the thing I do remember was you did have to do your chores before you could do your schoolwork. And so the idea of balance was a big part of what we grew up with. They did teach us to be very independent, which probably explains why I'm here and why my siblings are pretty much all over the world, actually.
Awesome. We're going to spend some time talking about parenting topics later in the show. But it sounds like right from early on, like education was a point of emphasis for your parents. Right?
It really was. And actually, let me do say this. The thing my dad always said to us was the best gift I can give you as children is education. This is a male-dominated environment where not everybody wanted to take their girls to school. But like I said, my parents, they would rather miss a meal, but make sure they pay tuition, school fees, and all that for their kids. So that's something I've carried with me, that education is a big inheritance. And even if I may not inherit old cash, shillings, as long as I have that education, I've gotten something worthwhile.
That's awesome. Yeah, as I even look back on my own story, I think the biggest thing that's transformed my life has been education. I'm one of four. I'm the first of four kids. My mom and dad came from little or no means. He had the dream of wanting to come study in the States
I remember.
when
Yeah.
he was younger. And so I grew up at home with just like a lot of brochures, Because those days, not like now where it's all like internet, you could just go on the website and look at stuff. You have to write a letter to the schools, like put in the mail, and then they send you physical brochures that you read. So it's almost like a room full of brochures. And you can imagine, like, all of them are very beautiful. Very beautiful brochures. They have the lawn or the quad. You got kids like laying on the grass in the sunny afternoon. So all this sort of inspired me to have that dream. I'm like, you know what? I want to pursue this dream. It became a defining thing for my life. And I was able to find the right opportunities to make it happen. So for me too, as I have my own kids, I'm like, if this is the only thing I can do for you guys, I think I've given you the foundation to be able to go.
Correct.
And then you pursue your own dream and pursue whatever passions that drive you. So let's fast forward now, growing up in Kenya to the States. Can you sort of set up the context for us? How was the general environment? Things like H-1B, student visas, like how was those things at that time compared to now?
Let me go back a little bit. I ended up attending one of the high schools in the country in Kenya, the girls' school. And in this school, the only thing what got you into school was your grade, had nothing to do with your economic background. So I got exposed to ministers' kids, people who were very rich, kids, girls who had been exposed to a lot of opportunities. And that's when I realized that as long as you give somebody an opportunity, they can go very far. And so that's sort of what created that forward dream of, I wonder what else I can do outside the country, and really set me on the journey to say, I may want to go to another country at some point. So fast forward, anyway, I always tried. And after a long journey, you know how things go, I ended up getting admitted to a college up in Massachusetts, Worcester State College for computer science. And once I landed here, there's a lot that obviously was a big culture shock, and we can talk about that. But the thing I do remember was saying, okay, I know I want to stay in this country. And we didn't have as much info as we do. So what do I need to do to stay in this country? I knew I had to make sure I didn't mess up my immigration status. And so I learned everything that I could. And I knew the path was very simple. One, I'm on F1 visa, so OPT, H1B, hopefully the green card, and then the citizenship, or I could marry somebody. I chose but had a route of, let's get all these things in place. And it was a lot different because I remember the year I got my H1B, they actually had 140,000 opportunities versus now where they still have 80K. But the whole idea was I knew what I wanted. I went after it and went after it big time. I remember even paying immigration lawyers to sort of walk me through the journey, just so I knew exactly the right thing to do so I don't mess around with the taxes, the finances, and all that stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Now it seems there's just this sort of anxiety that you could do all that you think you need to do to get something and still not get that thing, right? You could graduate, get the great job, and then you don't get the lottery, and the H-1B thing, and you don't get it. For me personally, when I think I was the last, like, this was in 2011, 2012, at that time frame. I think I was the last, like, H-1B class before the lottery system. There was no lottery. Like, my year when I applied, Like you applied and you just got it. And there was like it was not an issue. As long as you had a good job that was willing to file for you, that was all he took. Now obviously there's
Yeah,
more
yeah,
layers to it.
yeah.
There's that one and then there's the lottery.
I get what you're saying because, like I said, you could have a great job. Like I was looking
Yeah.
at this year's numbers,
Okay.
and I think close to 500,000
Oh.
people went into the lottery, which means they had jobs that were qualified, though companies willing to. So the approach I now take is, you're right. Let's do everything to set you up for a great position, and that's the first thing. We hopefully get the great position, and they get it for you. But on the other hand, I say, there's a possibility you may not get it. So I want you to have that mind shape and prepare yourself that you may not get it. If that happens, what's our backup plan? So in this case, is it possible to get the H-1B that's uncapped? So you work, let's say, for the government or for a university or for a non-profit organization. Can we look at those positions as well? Because those don't have any caps on them. Can we consider other visas? If you're from Canada, is it possible to get a TN visa, or Mexico? If you're from Australia, can you get the E3 visa? Is it possible for a company to send you back home and then you come back on the L1 visa? So what I want people to do is, this is option one. If that doesn't work, let's have a backup plan, option 2, option 3, option 4, option 5, all the way to the end. And if none of those work, be prepared to leave the country, and it doesn't mean you fail. It's all part of the process. So when I worked in tech, I actually ended up hiring people on the H-1B visa. And one of the things we did, if we couldn't get them the visa, was send them to Canada. I don't know if that's still an option now, or send them to Ireland or something like that. So it's a whole idea of these options. Let's explore all the options. Let's know what they are. And the whole idea of knowledge is power. For example, you can also go from F1 straight to a green card. So let's make sure we have all those options. And if none of those work, you could also go back to school. If we have to leave the country, it's okay. And so I want people to not be like a failed, that's the end of my story. Your story continues. It just continues in a different environment. Does that? Oh,
That
that
I
we're
think
thinking of. Okay,
yeah,
okay.
it's the anxiety too.
Right,
It's
I know.
where you come here. It's not just to you, like your family. Maybe
I know,
I know some people
I
who like maybe they
know.
sold some property or they sold some land. Like you
I
were the future.
know.
Go
I
and make
know.
us proud. And then you come. You do work hard. Like you do your best in school and all this stuff, and you crush your interviews and you get the job, and then it doesn't work out. So I can see why someone could feel like they failed. I think it's a good reminder. Actually, it's a good reminder, as you mentioned, to not feel like you failed. Like your story still continues and continues a different way. Part of managing anxiety is to also know the options and knowing, okay, I'm going to try for the H-1B this year. It may not work out. It may work out. It's awesome. It may not work out, but what is my next step? And what's my next step? And what's my next step? And hopefully having those different with options would help people feel a little bit less anxious.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I spoke with somebody a few weeks ago, and they've just been laid off. And they're like, oh my God, what do I do? And I go back to a lot of, you need to become a student of your visa. I can only guide you. And again, I'm not an immigration lawyer, but I'm happy to send you to folks that I know can help you. But let's become students of our visas, for example, and spend the time understanding everything possible. I talk to folks a lot about it, and I say everybody needs to have an immigration lawyer they can call anytime. And in terms of even our finances, and we'll probably talk about that, you need to have a legal bucket for when you need to talk to an immigration lawyer. So I agree with you. Knowledge is power. We really want to understand all the different options that are available, and there are quite a few. So it's not the end of the world.
Like double click on the early days of your own journey.
Sure.
What helped you to settle in more? You, like me, you came here through school, through the
Correct.
F1 college. What are some of the things, whether it's like other international students,
Sure,
other people
sure.
from Kenya, sports, I think you've mentioned tennis being a key part of your journey in college.
Yeah.
Like, what are some of those things that helped you to find yourself, to find a community and feel like, okay, now, I belong here and I can go for whatever I want to achieve?
Sure. So when I first landed here, just to set it up for you, it was a
Yeah.
complete culture shock. It looked nothing like what I'd seen on TV. the reality was completely different from expectations or from what I was thinking. So the first thing I had to do was do a very big mind shift change, I guess. And then I was very lucky. I was just in the first maybe 3 weeks, I ran into this person who has become a good dear friend of mine, an old school, high school colleague. And they saw me and they go, "Hey, you're so and so." And, they use my African name. And I'm like, "You done so what?" And so they took me under their wing. And the thing they said to me later was, "When I looked at you, Jane, you reminded me of a younger version of myself. And I could see the hunger and the desire. And so I made it a point of helping you walk the journey." I'd been given some crazy types of ideas, to say the least. Then I remember I kept thinking, no, that's not where I want to go. I really want to stay down the academic path. And so when I finally met somebody who's done it, who said, "I will help you," what a relief. And I'm so, so grateful that she saw me and she believed in me. And so I was able to become a part of her community because chances are she was already moving in the right sort of community. And that made a huge, huge difference. And so I said to people, find your community. Don't jump into the first community that you find until you know for sure that they want the same thing as you. It's the whole idea of, if you're a studious kid, you want to hang out with the other studious kids, then you guys will study together. So you definitely need to do that. And then in terms of community, one more thing I do say to immigrants is it's great to have that home community. They'll call you by your African name and it feels just right. You'll be able to have the food, the jokes, but you also need to become a part of the bigger community around you. So think of native-born citizens from here. Because when you think about it, people are afraid of what they don't know. And so once they get to know you, they realize, oh, you're human just like the rest of us. It gets a little bit easier to integrate and have a more fulfilling life. For example, when it comes to school, I didn't know a lot about what kids are supposed to be doing, but within my non-immigrant community, I'm able to figure out, okay, they go to school at this age. These are the things they need to be thinking about. And so I do think community is key. Be very careful. And if it takes you time to find the right community, it's okay.
Awesome. So it sounds like you need both.
Yes.
If you're African, for example, you need that African community, but at the same time, you also need a community outside of that. So expose you to those different culture aspects. As I think about my experience, at that time, we did have a host family program.
Okay.
Some schools have that. For me, it was very helpful. So during the breaks, Christmas break, whatever break, people go home and I have nowhere to go. I mean, you could stay on campus. Like the school would let you stay on campus and eat cafeteria food during those breaks. But I had a host family to go to. And then we'll go to a family's place for Christmas. I remember even building a gingerbread house. There's little things that we never did growing up. Yeah. We didn't go through the whole thing about Christmas tree and gifts under the Christmas tree, all the different American traditions, and the whole process of opening the gift and all the different stuff. Cool. But it was true, the host family program. And I was able to get exposed and, oh, this is very cool. So now I try to think about those types of traditions I want to create with my kids. But just more from even a career standpoint, though. When I moved to the States or came to college, I wanted to do political science was my thing. I wanted to be a diplomat for Nigeria. I used to read a lot of history books about the guys who fought for independence for Nigeria and about all these big names. My dad had a lot of books about that time in our history. And I wanted to be like them. I came in 2007, which was still good. And then in 08, 09, that's when the real estate financial crisis hit. I could see some of the juniors and seniors, international students, were trying to get a job. It was just hard. They couldn't get jobs. So a lot of people were doing grad school. That was the only thing to do afterwards. And as I thought about my political science major, this was I think I was a sophomore then. I'm like, what are the options to get an actual job with the political science? Not a lot. Not a lot, except I wanted to go to grad school. So I looked around and there was this girl, shout out to Rebecca Hichilo. She's from Zambia, but she did an internship at KPMG in New York at that time. I went to school in a small school in middle of Kentucky. And going to New York for an internship, that blew my mind. She was able to get an internship from our school nobody comes to in terms of big recruiters. She came back from her internship and was telling us all the different stories about New York. It just blew my mind. I'm like, you know what? That's my new goal. I want to go to New York. I essentially just did everything she did. Literally after that, she walked me through the classes she took, the professors who helped her, the alums who helped her, and I just sort of followed the same path, and it worked out exactly how it did for her. So it's actually very important to see those role models, to see those things that are possible, and you don't have to reinvent the wheels. I mean, sometimes it's cool to do your own paths, But if somebody has already gone that path, it's just easier. Obviously, you can always put your own spin to it. So you can always add something to it. But we started off at KPMG, and I feel like part of where I got in life too was that beginning. Like having an internship and starting off in a place like that opened a lot of doors for me down the road. So in my show, part of the journey that I explore is how people found their voice and how people get comfortable to be able to like essentially express themselves. So in your own journey, like what places or times do you say some of those things that helped you to get to that point where you felt comfortable in your own voice?
I think about this question a lot, and a lot of it comes down to different points, as you say. So when I first came, obviously, like I said, I first came to college here, and two things come to mind. I was all about, I want to do everything I can, but I need to find the right people to do these things with. So obviously, I joined the tennis team. I then joined I was going to say the drama teacher, because that's what we call it back home, but the theater club.
Yeah.
As I went and talked to the theater professor, because back home I'd actually been I'd done some theater, I'd gone to theater school. And so I was like, I'd like to continue exploring this. And I talked to her and I said, I'm here, this is what I've done. And she's like, oh my God, I think you're the answer to my prayers. I'm like, what do you mean? So she'd been wanting for years to put on this play called The Incredible Jungle Journey of Fenda Maria, which is a West African folk tale. And you need this princess, and she'd always said, I want somebody from Africa who could play this role. I'm thinking, okay, that's really interesting. This is serious stuff. This is good stuff. I guess I can stand up on what I've done in the past. And so I ended up doing this play with her, and we went around a bunch of schools and things like that. And then the other incident I'm thinking of, it's not an incident, but in college was when I first got on the dean's list. And it's like, okay, this is good. Because, you see all the students that are around you. They seem to know so much more. And then you see your results and you realize, okay, I think I'm doing well. So this is a good thing, right? I belong here. And so it goes forward. I think every time I've had success, it just reinforces the fact that I do belong here. And especially now with all that's going on, I've tried to go back a lot to say, this is what I've done. I've spent so much time learning about what I do, and I'm able to answer people's questions. I do belong here.
If I was to summarize it, I mean, it's the preparation aspect to it.
Correct.
Because you've had some prior experience coming here, and then actually like doing it to give you that sort of. Talked to several people now on the show, and it sounds like one of the common themes is this whole like just being very prepared about that thing. Like be very prepared. So like people ask you questions or whatever, like nothing's gonna trip you. I mean, obviously sometimes new questions can come up, but at least you could tell yourself like I've done what I can do for this thing. So
I've done what I can do.
So I should know whether it's anxiety or nervousness. And sometimes it's just what it is. Sometimes you're just anxious no matter what you do.
And I think the other thing, though, I want to say, when I go back to how we were brought up, I think we were brought up to be independent and confident. So that probably carries through as well. Because I can't think, and part of it is you sit back and think, even allow this expression, nobody dies twice. Does that ring a bell? That African saying, nobody dies twice. So what's the worst that can happen if I go into this situation and I feel, for example, who I wildly succeed?
You can't get out of life alive or something, not necessarily.
Yeah, it's basically like, what's the worst that can happen? And of course, it applies to different situations. So you go into these situations and what's the worst? So always asking myself, what's the worst that can happen? And sometimes I think the fears we build have nothing to do with what ends up happening. I remember the first time I think I filed my taxes and I didn't do it right. It was not a good thing. And the fears that came was, they're going to kick me out of the country. They're going to kill me. They're going to, all sorts of fears. I don't want to deal with IRS. But when I really sat back and thought, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, I'll just have to refile. And so I'm okay going into this space and just being confident.
For the fast forward to your own professional life, because it sounds like you, before on journey to company, you manage people and such. Experiences or any stories from from a professional standpoint, from a career standpoint that you can think about that was sort of a clarifying to you that says, yes, I could do this and be a manager. I could get to this level that I want to be? Any like moments like that from a professional standpoint?
Yeah. So when I was in IT all my life, I did a lot of database administration programming, and I kept raising my hand to do the non-technical stuff. And so I realized early on, I really enjoyed the people stuff because, like I said, when I say database programming, a DBA, you basically are in your own queue. You may talk to the people around you, and you only talk to your end users a lot of times when they're at issue. But I found I really enjoyed talking with people and, like I say, just doing the people stuff. So I did find some mentors, and the company had started offering some mentors. And so reached out to these folks and started talking with them. And I remember this lady saying to me, Jane, you can be whatever you want. I kind of believed it, but to hear somebody else voice it, that was a big part of it, a big deal. And so I reached out to, it was a good thing, internal postings, and started looking for managerial positions. And I applied for one, went through the interview process, and I got it. And that for me was, so this journey that I've been on, I've done the technical stuff. So when I talk with this technical team I'm going to be managing, I won't be lost. But there's also all this other people stuff I feel I can bring to the table. I was one of those people that anytime the company offers, those internal learning things, soft skills, communications, I took pretty much all of that, honestly, like all of them, negotiation skills, pretty much everything. And so when I'm going into the situation again, I think we go back to being prepared. I knew I'll be prepared for this, but of course it still took somebody saying, yes, we'll give you this position. It's obviously a little different now. I do remember, again, going back, looking at my company's IT department, though not that many immigrants, and though maybe like 2 Black women in the whole space. So there's the whole idea of, I know who I am. I bring some unique qualities into the position, and so I'm going to go for it and then see what happens.
I guess 2 things just to me. The first one is this idea of having somebody who can see in you those things that you can't see on.
Sure.
Like multiple instances where that's helped me. Example in my life was my first one of my college. She's passed now. But from the very beginning, like she would take me to, I did a class about poverty and justice with her. So she's a religion professor, and she was doing like a research project that summer. And then she took me to Louisville, Kentucky, which is like the big city in Kentucky, Louisville, and summer project. So it involved like going to housing projects and talking to people. And this was me after my freshman year where I could barely feel confident in my accent. But I have to go to like this big, to me then, Louisville seemed like a big city. A housing project, knock on strangers' doors, like knock on the doors and say, hey, excuse me, do you have, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes to respond to a bunch of questions? Oh my God. So for me, like, having to go through that and some people be like very nice or welcome you home, you sit down, sometimes they won't offer you water, like slam the door at you. To me, like I found that experience of going through that and seeing all the rejections and people slamming the door at me, and some people being very nice, like some people just genuinely like going through all of that. So that helped me to find my voice or helped me to gain some confidence in myself. But it all started because someone even thought I could do it. Even when at that point I didn't, like, me go to a stranger's home and knock on doors. What do you think? And send somebody else who's from there. You know what I mean? But I think even her just seeing that in me and asking me to do this, like that sort of made a big difference for me. And the second thing you mentioned was this whole like the different trainings. So you're saying oftentimes you get alternative trained corporate quiet ones. You have those like suggested ones, but not mandatory. And oftentimes people, I'm not going to say me, but people just click through them. Oh, you know what I mean? Actually pay attention to them.
Do them. They're free. Yeah. And you definitely learn a lot. And especially when they do the role playing. Yeah. So yeah, take advantage of them. Do them all.
All right. Moving on again, in terms of learning sort of you, we're going to talk about aspects of that sort of immigrant journey for you from your kids. Sort of shaped how you approach like money, wealth, and financial planning.
I approach everything with an abundant mindset, which I think makes a really huge difference. I also think of money as a tool versus a goal. So money is a tool that will allow me to live a certain kind of life. And so when I work with people and it's going to play into this, I want to understand where they're coming from, because that does shape how they think about money. I also want to think about where they're going, because then we have a goal. And then we think about this tool that's going to enable us to get there. So let's have that abundant mindset. I love the immigrant mindset. I call it our superpower, where people see problems, we see opportunities. And so I want to bring that into everything that I'm doing, because that will absolutely help you build well. Just having that, I don't need to do what others have done. I can create my own journey, will allow you really to create your own wealth. But of course, you do have to have the resources to do it. And we can talk about how you get the resources. But I think with that mindset, and again, from my upbringing, that does make a difference in where we end up with our wealth or where we go. Considering we're first gen, literally, we came to this country with nothing.
Segue to spending some time talking about your business. So tell us about Elgon Financial Advisors. I'm curious about the name and what that name came from, first of all.
Oh, sure. I
And
got a
then,
beautiful story.
what question is achieve long term?
So let me go back a couple of years and just give you the story of how we get here. I'm a new immigrant. I have my H-1B visa, and my spouse is from a different country, in fact, a different continent. He'd come in on an L1 visa. I've been talking to different immigration people, just trying to understand what it is that we need to do to move on to the next step. So I knew being on work visas, for example, there are financial mistakes you do not want to make. Otherwise, that could impact when you finally come to get the green card and the citizenship. And it's true, because one of the questions they ask you is, have you been a person of good moral standing? Answer is, have you been filing your taxes correctly, right? So I have this here because I know where I want to go. My prime directive, as I talk about it, is I needed to get the H-1B, the green card, and become a citizen. And so I reached out to a few financial advisors. And of course, I'm afraid. There's the fear of, who am I to go talk to these big firms? What are they going to say to me? Do I have the assets for them to help us with? But finally, convinced my spouse, we went to this person, and it was a complete disaster. Disaster. The person asked us a couple questions, and what do you want to do? And we kind of said what everybody says, retire. But my idea of retirement was completely different from what I'd seen in pictures. My idea of retirement was what I'd seen back home. He did not delve into that. Asked us a few other things about our expenses, asked us about our savings, but really did not delve into what is it that you guys are doing with your money, and what is it do you want to do with your money? Remember, it's a tool. And we had chosen deliberately to do this the first couple of years before we started having kids. And so at the end of the whole thing, we came back, and the plan that he was going to give us, he just basically scolded us. Like, how can you guys not be saving enough money? How do you think you're going to retire? And I keep saying, I know tough love. This was not tough love. This was a scolding. And then he goes on to say, I can take you on, guys, if you promise to save. Of course, we got out of there so fast. And I walked away with this sense of, we never got a chance to ask our immigration-related financial questions, which is what we had. I really walked away feeling like, I'm going to fail on this whole journey. I remember thinking there's a lot more of us in this situation and have nobody to talk to. And it took us a couple of years before we'd go back to another advisor. And so my thing was, there are people like us who need help. They need somebody to talk to, and they don't have that person. So that was my whole origin of, I need to do something. So first forward, at some point, I ended up doing my CFP. I worked with a great mentor. I thank him every day for everything I learned from him. And some of the clients that we worked with were actually foreign doctors here on J1 visas and things like that. And every time we would talk, I mean, when doctors are in resident, they're not making much money, but you know the big bucks are going to come in. So you probably know that with your wife, right? They all talked about, I need to be supporting family. I remember this one doctor, he was supporting a family of like 10. And so they're asking, what else can we do to help this? And I realized we need a firm designed to work with this group of people that absolutely takes their cultural background into consideration and makes it a part of the financial planning process. I need a firm where we don't lead with investments. Investments will be important, but we need to talk about all these other stuff, the tax complexity of having one foot in one country and another, the cross-border aspect, and then we can come to the investments. And so that's what Elgon Financial Advisors is all about. It's literally the firm that I wish I've been able to talk to. Because like I said, we're from different countries. My family is literally from all over the world. It's an international family. We need somebody that's willing to look at all those things and integrate them into the full financial planning process. So that's the mission of the firm. And in terms of the name, Mount Elgon is a mountain range between Kenya and Uganda. And I remember learning about it in primary school and high school. What's so cool about Mount Elgon is it's very hikeable. So almost anybody can do it in a couple of days. But as you hike, you really do need a guide, somebody to kind of say, watch out for that, watch out for these animals. But it's doable, right? Now, when you get to the top of Mount Elgon, what's so cool about it and what's so different about Mount Elgon, the goal is not to give the summit. You get to the top and then you descend into some hot springs over there. So to me, the journey of your financial planning process in the US, dealing with all the tax things, all the complexities, the immigration thing, that's what I want you to be on. I'll be your guide. When we get to the top, we'll sink into the hot springs and say, yes, we've achieved. That's what it is.
That's a very beautiful story, beautiful mission. And thank you for doing something like this, because it's easy in our lives. Like, we have different things like you go through, oh my God, like if only somebody can fix that problem. For me, my mom, she lived in Nigeria most of her life. She's only been here for the last 2 or 3 years. And I would take her to like a dentist's appointment, different type of thing. And I remember the one specifically was an eye one, like an eye doctor. And the way like she was treated, the way they ask her questions, because most of the time I'll go with her when we go to all different support appointments, and most people try to be nice, But this was an eye doctor. She's like, hey, do this thing, and sometimes it takes my mom a minute to understand what she's trying to say. And it was just that one, I had to find a doctor now who's Nigerian. And so after I go through different providers and stuff, and not all of them having that sort of sensitivity, even if you don't understand this person from different country, but at least be patient. At a minimum, be patient. Say, oh, can you do this for me? And just wait and see how to respond before you move on to the next thing. And so I definitely appreciate when people see a problem like this, and then you're not just sit back and say, oh yeah, let me go find someone else, but say, hey, I think I can actually try to fix it.
Well, thank you for saying that.
And it's because I'm in finance and I do a different kind of finance. But what this sort of reminds me is, I remember when I was even doing public accounting, so CPA like audits, in New York, people would be like, oh, can you do my tax? I'll be asking me like tax questions. I'm like, no. Yes, I might be a CPA. I don't know tax questions. A lot of my friends now work in finance. Some are doing banking or doing different things. But I think personal finance is different. I might know how to do a DCF to value a company, but in terms of like my own personal finance, I think I know it. But to be honest, the more I think about it, I'm like, I may know finance broadly speaking, or a specific type of finance, but when it comes to actually like personal finance and investing, I realize I do not understand it. It kind of reminds me of my wife. So my wife is a doctor, and a lot of people would, even when a lot of people just think, oh, she should just have all the answers. Like when our son or daughter, oh yeah, you should know what's wrong. But she's like, no, I'm not a pediatrician. Like I don't have the answer for all the kids' problems. I can broadly speaking, say it could be this or this thing. But I couldn't just say, yes, I would diagnose my own child. Like I would have to take them to the hospital to go see an actual pediatrician. So how would you respond to somebody like that? Someone like that says, hey, I have an MBA. I took some finance courses in business school. How would you respond to them? Why the services that you offer is still going to be helpful to that kind of person?
So I have so many thoughts around this. And one of the things, I actually spoke to an investment banker a while back, and they said, I knew none of these things. Personal finance is very different from what you're saying from being a CPA. Because when it comes to personal finance and the approach that I take, it's not just go save in your 529. Almost anybody can do that, or go open a Roth if it's appropriate for you. Almost anybody can do that. But it's tying everything together. And so when I do financial planning with a client, we start with defining what I call your true wealth plan. We'll have lots of conversations before we even get to the number. So I completely understand where you're coming from again. Take all your cultural background into consideration before we talk about where you're going. And that helps me figure out how you make your decisions. So the whole idea of money psychology. Once I know that, and we create that perfect vision of your life, then it's very easy for me to sort of start pulling different levers in place to say, okay, 529 may not be the ideal situation for you as an example because, and we talk about why that may not be appropriate for you. So the solutions we come up with are going to be exactly for your situation. Like I said, they take your cultural background into consideration. They take into consideration how you think about money. And we also make sure we understand why you think about it that way. I have people who come to me and they have $1 million in the bank and they feel poor. And we start digging into
like
it.
$1 million cash. Ooh,
Yes, I had an incident like that. Not an incident, but a case like that. And you realize it's the way they were brought up and the fact that they had to go back and forth between the two countries. So they've never felt satisfied. And there's this number in their mind that they need to feel like they've reached the end. The other thing is when it comes to all these, you probably see me talk a lot about the tax implications of you can't just go, fine, sure, you can go buy a house in Kenya or Nigeria or invest in mutual funds there. But we need to talk about the implications of you being a U.S. tax resident with foreign assets invested overseas. So those are the things I'm able to bring into the picture, all the tax implications, which with the MBA, you might say, yeah, I can go ahead and figure out if this is a good fund to invest me. I may say, maybe not for your situation. So there's a lot of the psychology behind it, the understanding the why, and putting the whole thing together. And another one that might be interesting is if I have people coming from different countries, not only are we dealing with the financial implications of that, the different tax treaties, the different tax regimes, but we're also dealing with the whole cultural things that we're bringing into the picture and figuring out where we want to go. So when I work with clients, and ideally we work over a long period of time, when somebody finally says to me, I get it, then I know, okay, we've accomplished what we set out to accomplish.
So I think one of the things too that could hold people back is the idea of you have to have a lot of net assets, a lot of money.
I know.
Financial planning is only, to be honest, I'm one of those people. They think financial planning is like for rich people, like for very rich people. I have no one of these, it must not be for me. So in terms of the clients that you take on, I don't know if it's something you put out there, but is there some type of like threshold or some type of say, okay, you have to have some amounts for us to work together? Or how does that play into the kind of people you serve?
So with most of the immigrants coming to the U.S., when you think about them, they got great income, 200K, 300K, 400K. Almost all their assets right now are going to be invested like in their 401ks, and we'll talk about those. So these are the people that really need help, but they don't have the assets to manage. So what I have is a minimum fee. As long as you're able to pay my fee, I will take you on, and we can start adding investment assets into the picture. Because you do have, like, again, just thinking of you guys in your situation, you got different incomes, you have kids, you probably have a lot of needs where it would help to have sort of somebody, a neutral person, guide you through the situation. So I go more with the minimum fee versus the minimum assets, which is what a lot of funds will do. And that's what kind of makes a lot of us say we don't want to go to a financial advisor because we don't have the assets to manage.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm trying to the extent we can demystify this, because there's certain things like this where it just seems like a very luxury good. It's how people look at it, like we're just very wealthy people who have millions of dollars. So you're saying I don't have to have $1 million to have a
If you can
financial
pay my minimum fee, let's talk. Because again, like I said, it's that holistic financial planning. And again, we have a lot of needs. So think about every transition you go through. Every life transition typically has a number associated with it. You had your first kid, your budget changed completely, your lifestyle changed. You have a second kid, now you're thinking college, you switched jobs, something else happens, you're thinking of buying a house. It's another life transition. So what I say to people is, and this is what happened, people tend to have transitions, and that's when they reach out. So those transitional moments, that's probably the best time to talk to an advisor, assuming you didn't have a relationship with one. And then, like I said, we have obviously, we look at everything through your immigration lenses, which a lot of firms would not be willing to do. So even in terms of what I recommend you do or invest in, I'm looking at it through your current immigration lenses.
So even if you H-1B person,
especially H-1B,
J-1, all the different classes of visa, you work with people.
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
In terms of how you actually work on the services, do you do things like estate planning? Is that part of the picture or no?
What I say to people is we're going to look at everything in your life that has a number.
Okay.
So that will include estate planning, insurances, investments, pretty much anything in your life that has a number. I have access to what I call outsourced estate planning services, and I'm able to use that to help you put an estate plan together. When you're an immigrant on a non-immigrant visa, like the H-1B, because technically those are meant to only last a while, that we really talk about estate planning, because if we don't, your family's going to suffer. You're going to be hit with some ridiculous estate taxes God forbid, you get hit by a bus, that kind of thing. So we really do need to address this. And so when I start working with people after we have that initial conversation, I do a SWOT analysis, right? And when we start identifying threats, one of the threats I always find is they probably don't have enough life insurance, or they have the wrong kind. They don't have an estate document in place, and they have young kids. And so we'll start by addressing those threats before then we can get to the weaknesses and the opportunities and the strengths. So it's pretty much everything in your life that was a number looked at through immigration lenses, and also looked at through where you're coming from, including things like multiple citizenship. So all that stuff that goes into it, that's what we're doing.
Okay. I have two little kids, as I told you before we started recording. We went to our church has a community fair, and one time, not too long ago, they had a fair, and they had lots of like vendors from the community go to the fair. And one of the person was like an estate lawyer person, and we went to go talk to her. And my mom was there. Mom was like, "Why are you talking to?"
Oh yeah.
It was so funny because she had a visceral reaction that we are even thinking about like wills and estate planning. To her, it's I don't know. It's like it just brings some like a bad omen that you're thinking about it. So I'm like, no, it's fine.
And we need to do it in this country. So what I say to people is, you already have an estate plan, by the way. The one that the state will put together for you if you die without a will. So it's just a matter of which one do you want to go with. So let's put your ideas and plans in place and your desires.
That's a good framing. So thank you for spending the time to explain some of how all of this works. One of the things for immigrants that we have to, myself included, deal with is this idea of this black tax of having a lot of demand, or just a lot of expectations from your family, extended family, to help them pay the school fees for this person, or pay their rent for this person. This person is sick. You're trying to take care of yourself, take care of your family. And then sometimes you have a whole other family elsewhere, maybe extended family, your siblings, your aunties, your uncles, or what. As you work with immigrants, how do you think about that in the context of helping them plan when they have this whole nother demand that I guess a regular American or non-immigrant might not have to deal with?
Couple of thoughts come to mind. I actually wrote a post a while back called "You're Your Parents' Retirement."
That is very, and it's growing up, that's what it used to be.
We sent you to the US for education, and so you're going to take care of us. So the first thing is understanding that and understanding where they're coming from. Yes, you are your parents' retirement plan. The next thing is when I start working with you, unlike I think a lot of other US advisors, I don't assume, I just say, I know there's a bucket where we are supporting family. And it's not until I say that people feel comfortable enough saying, oh, yeah, I'm sending $1,000 home. It's like, okay, let's just put it out there. So we'll look at the full picture. And what I've realized is some people have never looked at the full picture to see how much they're sending home. But you look at the whole budget and it's like, okay, I'm sending home, let's say $1,000 every month, which means I'm only left with so much. So this is now where I try and bring your vision of your future. What do you want to do with your life? Where do we want to go? And we've painted that clearly. So we want to go here, but with this $1,000, for example, we're never going to get there. So just start having that tough conversation. I'm not saying don't support them because I completely understand. And so we then go back to, do we need, and every situation is different, do we need to go back and talk to them about how much you've been sending? That's one. And do we need to put a line on that? Because I worked with somebody once and I felt bad. She couldn't even pay for my services because she was sending everything home. Wow. So at that point, I'm like, we need to talk to them. And again, it's not an easy conversation. And you need to limit who it is that you're sending the money to. Sure, you're sending it to your dad, but you can't add his brother and his sister. At some point, we
Yeah.
need to draw some boundaries. And I know
Yeah.
it's hard. So I try and bring a lot of empathy into the situation. So we talk through it, but then hopefully you trust me enough to give me all the details and we can see where we can put boundaries and where we can start making some deductions. And then the next idea is there anything you can do for them that will start generating income? So we do this once and for all. This doctor that I mentioned was asking, what can I do to generate income for them? Maybe we could invest for them in the country where we won't have to worry about US taxes. So it doesn't mean it's you sending money back and forth constantly. And then the other thing I'll talk a lot about, and I've done this here, is we have a set budget. Once I hit that budget, if I said it was 500 and there's another contribution, I'm comfortable saying, sorry, my budget will not support that this month, maybe next month. So it's coming down to being aware, having the hard conversations, being willing to put some boundaries on it and helping them to, what do they say, teach a man to fish, helping them to figure out how to fish. But these are conversations you're probably going to keep coming back to over and over again. And so I say to my clients, you can blame me if it helps, but let's keep talking about it, which is why you can also see why a long-term relationship is the best for some of these ideas.
You feel like one topic we could keep at talking about.
Absolutely.
Can you give us an example of a moment where a client of yours said, just, hey, thank you, Jane. If not for you, this thing would never happen. Or I'm so glad could you help me avoid this thing or help me get this thing. Just an example of some of those type of moments that shows you why you're doing what you're doing and how fulfilling your job can be.
There's a site called Wealth Tender where people can review their financial planners, and I've gotten some amazing reviews, things I would not have thought about. I have one client and their monies was scattered all over the place. We've had very long and difficult conversations along the lines of just bringing them on the same page. And the other day they finally said to us is we can now see we'll be able to achieve our goal. We're able to travel. We're able to do all the things we've set out to do. It's not been easy, but with your guidance, you've helped us do that. I had another client that I walked through like a 6-month journey so they could take a sabbatical. And I remember talking to them during the sabbatical. We made it happen and they were like, this is the best thing I ever did. It's almost like, and I'm like, I didn't do anything, but they said, you actually gave us permission to believe this is doable. So the whole idea of we come into it like we gotta work. And I'm telling you, no, we can make the most of what we have. We can enjoy what we have. And I'm giving you not only permission to do it, but here are the numbers and how they'll look. Maybe you have to work another extra year, but that is so much more impactful than just, well, does that answer your question? Or do you want me to give you some more examples?
That was like an accountability partner, like
That
just having
does
someone to
help,
say, hey,
yes.
here's our goal and actually hold you to it. Because for me too, I have certain goals, even like in terms of how much I send home or how much I help with certain people. Like I have a budget in mind. I'm like, okay, this is it. But then every now and then I'm like, okay, just go over it just this one time. I'm like, all right, I really feel sorry for them just this one time. And then I'm like, what? I was just making an exception for you. Now you're adding on top of it and on top of it. Then I regret why I even made that exception in the first place.
And what would be helpful if we had already allocated it to something else here, then you wouldn't have it.
Good point. But yeah, in my mind, I feel like, yes, if I had that type of accountability, okay, you know what? This is it. All right, this is the budget for this thing. And now we've exceeded it. I guess we'll revisit this next year.
And it's okay.
Yeah. So I do hope a lot of people, listeners, feel empowered to explore services like this, personal finance, because it's something that we oftentimes just overlook because we think we don't have a lot of millions in assets or we don't make a lot of money. But as I think about it, I think no matter where you are, I could see a place for this type of service. And then I guess obviously the immigrant angle too, because another thing too, when you have a H-1B, when you don't have like a longer term one, like an immigrant type, would be like, if something were to happen to me, like a layoff, you mentioned there's been a lot of big tech layoffs recently, for example, like why should I even spend time like even trying to invest or maximize or make my portfolio efficient one of these days, all of this might just go away. I might just have to go back home. But then if I invest a lot of money in my 401k, or if I even buy a home, I might have to leave all this stuff behind.
Sure.
Yeah.
But when you first come to me, I do say you don't ask people about their immigration status, but I explain in this relationship, it's important that you tell me and I know exactly where you are because I understand the whole spectrum. I can take a line and say, okay, here you are, you got the approved I-140. If you're from India, we know it's going to be 20
Yeah, it takes
years
longer.
before you can
Yeah.
get the green card. So I understand that and I'll lay it out for you. And so part of it is just me saying, I understand we're not going into these blindly. So if nothing happens to your job and you never get the green card, you may have a good 5-6 years, for example, right? So I want you to be very flexible. That's the first thing. Whatever strategies I'm going to recommend to you are probably not what I'm going to recommend to your friend down the street who's from a different country because of all the tax implications. But there's no reason we cannot start investing, for example. If you're from certain countries, we're not going to do a Roth, even though everybody says do a Roth because of the tax implication. Maybe we're just going to go with a taxable account. And this is the reason why, and this is what we're going to invest it in. So what that now, we don't need to wait. Whatever happens, happens. So that's the first thing. Let's start now. If you're from, again, this country, you're on this visa, I know everybody's buying a house, and you know how it is. Your parents, oh, so-and-so's daughter, they've already bought 2 houses. What are you doing? We need to stop comparing ourselves with the others because you don't understand their situation. We need to think about what it is that we're investing in. I know a house is important because you've kind of mentioned it, and I know this question comes up, but we probably need to hold off because this is a long-term investment or asset. If you tell me for sure you hear the next 10 years, I may say, okay, but we're going to run the number. So there are a lot of people have said, no, you're not going to buy a house. You've given me permission to tell you that.
Yeah.
This is where we're going to invest the money. Obviously, you have to agree to work with me. So it's being flexible for one, being willing to be realistic. And then on top of that, I'll do a lot. Like I did this post the other day when I saw Microsoft laid off like 60K people. If you've been laid off, here are the steps you can take, again, taking into consideration your immigration status. But what would have been better is if you're taking these steps before you got laid off. So I have these 2 posts I share every now and again. Here are things you can do, again, being realistic in case you're going to get laid off. We want to be prepared for that eventuality.
So it sounds like, so if you're on, I guess a H-1B could be 3 to 6 years. So if you're on something shorter, there's still a possibility for you to invest. They know like, oh, I just should not do any financial planning. You should just not invest, not do anything because I don't have a long-term status.
So even if you only have 1 year and you have 30, 40 Ks just sitting there idle, let's invest it. The other thing I say to people is once you leave, let's say something happens and you leave a country, you own those assets. Nobody will ever take that away from you. So you can leave it invested here. It's your money. You can let it grow. And there's a reason why everybody invests in the US to be able to get it. And again, what I'll do is based on where you could end up going, we'll just assume your home country, I'll ensure that we're at a brokerage or a custodian that will allow you to put a foreign address on the thing. There's specific things, again, you may know where you're coming from, we may not invest in. So my investment philosophy is we're going to invest in things, let's say, whether it's mutual funds or ETFs or things like that I know you can hold on long term, even into your, 60s, 70s, 80s when you retire. So there's no reason not to start investing. The only reason I'll say don't invest is, let's say you don't have an emergency fund, or let's say you have debt, then that's a different conversation.
So the way you work, do you actually select what they invest, or how does that actually work?
Oh, yeah. So if you do, like I said, the ideal planning relationship is financial planning combined with investment management. So you come to me, we have a minimum fee, you're able to make that fee. I'll tell you that includes up to, I think right now it's like maybe up to 500K or something like that. So I will go ahead and actually invest your money for you. So I'm also finding I'm doing a lot of education on investments. What should I be investing in? Let's say we talked about your 529. Where should I open that 529 account? I will go ahead and open it for you. Obviously, I'll show up on the thing as your advisor and actually do the actual investment. when it comes to 401ks, I'll look at everything available to you. I'll compare with what we have outside. And if need be, we'll share screens and I'll tell you, pick that. So I am holding your hand as much as you allow me to ensure we put like a portfolio together for you that works for your situation.
Sort of clarify if it's just more
Sure,
like, hey,
sure.
I think you should just invest in ETFs. But if you actually say, okay, this is a particular one you should invest in, and this,
I would tell you down to the line and the amount and when. And like I said, as long as you open accounts with Elgon, we'll do all that work for you and then just walk you through this is what we've done and why.
do you have a portal to track
Oh, yeah,
okay.
absolutely. Yep, we have everything. So when somebody joins, becomes a client, for example, I have a portal where you can see all the work that we are doing. I also use it to keep track of all the tasks that we have. The way I do it, you're familiar with agile planning?
Yep.
So we have these, we know we have 100 things we need to work on. You're just going to be getting maybe quarterly tasks or something like that. You complete your bid, I complete my bid. So over time, you can see what we are achieving and we're keeping track of everything that we're doing. So yeah, we do have all those portals to keep it going.
It sounds like a full comprehensive service.
It's a full comprehensive service.
We could keep going on and on and on
Sure,
on this.
sure.
But I want to quickly shift focus to one topic that's important to me, and maybe it's to some of our listeners as well, which is parenting. And coming from the backgrounds that we come from, where there's a certain way kids are raised, which at least in my case, a lot of it is like as a kid, you just like listen to your parents and just do what they tell you to do. And then in America, you come here, it's a little different. I think one of the biggest surprises for me was I remember as a freshman, my freshman roommate, he was from West Virginia then. So I went, it was one of the first breaks, either Thanksgiving break, one of the break holidays. I went to West Virginia with him, Charleston, West Virginia. He had a little sister. She was probably like a teenager then. But like just the way, like even like was calling the dad by his first name, the way she was talking back at the dad, I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This, in my mind, I didn't say it out loud. It was very different to me. Like, I'm like, hey, this girl's probably 11 or 12, I don't know, maybe a preteen. And then the way she's like talking to her dad, it was just very foreign to me. And fast forward now, I have my own kids. And in this topic about voice, when I think about my own experience, finding myself and being comfortable in my own voice, I sometimes think it's maybe the way I was brought up, where we're brought up to be like not too expressive. Maybe that's what's hindered me, but maybe it's not. It doesn't have to be. But that's what something you're looking for reasons. And then I'm like, oh, but here in America, the kids from a very early age, they're free to talk, they're free to do whatever. So maybe that's why an average American kid is more confident to express themselves more than like an average Nigerian kid. But actually, that's not, the way I know that's not totally true is because they have quiet kids in America too. They're not quiet people who are just very quiet. In Nigeria too, they have the opposites. They have people who just talk, wherever they go, they talk, no matter where they are. And the two sides of it. But just, as you mentioned, so your kids are older now, but like how did you approach parenting and trying to balance some of the values that you grew up with in your culture and some of the values and the realities that we face now in America? Like, how did you think about that whole picture?
So we could talk about this for hours. So I'll see if I can give you like a short version of it. My kids are now in college, sophomore and junior. And the other day, my youngest, they do tennis. I've mentioned tennis. So tennis is a big part of our family. They came home and said to me, oh, these kids are so entitled. I'm like, talk to me about it. Nobody says no to them. So when I say no to them, they don't want to listen. And it's so bad. And she went on and I'm thinking to myself, thank God.
Yeah.
My take is, I look at my culture, and again, we coming from two different countries. Very early on, the one thing is you can't just walk into this. You have to be very deliberate and intentional about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And so it's looking at our cultures and say, here are the really good things about our culture that I want to pass on to the kids. So respecting their elders. So for example, my kids know we don't call grown-ups by their first name. You do Mr. John or Miss Mary, whatever that is. And when I look around and my kids will come and say, oh, Miss Jane, and the look on other people's faces is like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then you start modeling that. So that was something we decided was really critical. And so even when we're talking to them about the grown-ups, we'll always say Mr. or Miss. And so they carry that forward. And telling them lots of stories about how we grew up and what's expected. So, for example, when we go back home, I've had these conversations about when you're here, you can dress any way you want. But when you're going to visit grandma and grandpa, this is the expectation and this is why. And so it's really emphasizing the important ones and knowing I can't take everything, because this culture also has some good things. Like you teach them to be independent. I really like that. You teach them to stand up for themselves, even though it's an adult, but do it very respectfully. I did see one time my oldest stand up to a parent. They were playing in a tennis tournament. The parent was not being very nice, and I think they were going to help the child heal a little bit. And my youngest, she may have been like 12 or 13, stood up for herself, but very, very respectfully. So it's doing all that and modeling that at home and really practicing. And then the other thing we always did in our house is talk a lot about this is what we do in our house. We don't know what they do in their houses, and that's okay. So like when kids come home and say, oh, so-and-so's house, they do this, I'll be like, that's really good to know. That's interesting and good for them. But this is what we do here. So I think it's deciding what are those values that you want the kids to have. And it's not easy, by the way.
Yeah.
But what are those values, and start passing them on. It may not become apparent at the beginning, but now seeing how my kids are behaving with some of the younger kids, I'm like, I think something going on, we managed to pass on something.
Congrats. I feel like that's the dream. That's the dream. To get to a point where they can stand up for themselves, but do it respectfully. I feel like
Do it
it's a very hard
respectfully.
balance.
Yes, it is. One of my girls said to me, I don't think parents should be friends with their kids. And I'm like, where did that come from? And then they explain, as a parent, you need to draw boundaries. You need to talk to your kid. And when they explain the situation, I'm like, yeah, I see what you're saying. But like I said, it's not easy. But I think if you guys decide these are the core values and keep going back to, this is what we do in our house, even simple things like when we eat, we all eat together at the table. And once we finish, everybody takes their dish to the sink. And when other kids come to visit, they will do what your kids are doing, because this is what we do in our house. I feel like it's been very helpful for us.
That's awesome. So it's modeling those traits, so those behaviors that you want the
Yes,
kids
but decide
to
what's
take after.
important, because
Yeah.
you don't want to have all these many fights, especially when they see what's important to you guys and what's going to make an impact and a difference in their lives. Focus on those 4, 5, 6 things.
To tie this to financial planning or finances
Yes.
now, how do we start thinking for people with little kids? How do we start thinking about, because now, whether it's on Twitter or social media, be like, oh yeah, the American educational system fails kids because it doesn't teach them about finances. And then they graduate from college and they don't know how to save, how to do this and how to do that. It's not just from an immigrant perspective, just as a society in general. It seems like there is this thought that as a whole, the educational system is failing kids when it comes to financial education. But if we want to focus on the immigrant parents specifically, how do we start this journey teaching them about financial literacy and systems?
So you're right. The school system has failed us, but I'm not going to leave there. And that's the first thing I said. So the other day, and I'll share a link after this, I had my daughter offered to do a blog post to talk about how I've taught them about money from when they were young. And what was so amazing is she went back to that stuff, that we did this when they were 6 years old. So the overall idea that we both, my husband and I, agreed to was, one, they needed to understand, again, those are those 4 critical things. Money is earned, not given. That's one. The day we go to the store and they try to pull a tantrum because they want some sweets
I'm dealing
and
with that
candy.
now. I deal with that every day.
So when that happens, find all these teachable moments. But my point is, the day they do that, they're ready to learn about money. They may not be ready to do the rod, but they're ready to learn about the value of money, right? So that to me was a conversation for, okay, when we go to the store, we have a shopping list and we only buy the things on the shopping list. So if you need that, please add it to the shopping list, which is on the kitchen counter. And then the next time we go to the store, we're only going to buy things on the shopping list.
She's going to be adding stuff to it.
But you talk through it. And the minute you get had this one thing and you decide as a family, how far you want to go, it makes a huge difference. And then the idea of, I remember being told that I need to give kids money so they can manage. We completely disagreed with that. And I said, this does not work in our family, because why should I give them my money
That's
to
true, to
manage?
manage.
So the idea is let them earn some money and then they can manage
Manage.
that
Oh, I
money.
like, no, I see it.
And
Yeah.
so what would end up doing is daddy works, mommy works, you guys can also work. And so what we did was we created a system where we call them jobs. So little jobs around the house. But here was the kicker. You had to finish your assigned chores before you could do the paying job.
Oh, I
So
see.
you make your bed, everybody puts away big shoes, but find like, it'll be like two
Extra
or three
things.
job extra things
Okay,
that I
like it.
could maybe pay somebody. We lived in Massachusetts where there would be snow. You clear the snow, we can pay you. So I found like, we found 5, 6 of those paying job things. And so you finish all your other chores, you do those little jobs. We keep track. And then from what my daughter said, and I forgot this, every weekend or every Sunday afternoon, we sat at the table and we looked at what jobs you did, and you already knew how much you're going to be paid and paid cold cash. Let them handle money. And so would have a wad of like 21. It's like, okay, 1, 2, so there's your money. And then right away, from what she said, and again, I'd forgotten some of it, you'd have them spread that money out into just 3 buckets, spend, save, and give. And so you did that over time. And so they start understanding money is earned, right? It's not given, right? I mean, you're meeting all their basic needs, right?
Sure.
And then the next thing was, let's create some goals. So you're working towards a goal with this money that you're saving. So for them, it was the first backpacks they bought. They bought it with their own money. Would have a chart that says, okay, I'm working towards buying a backpack. I've already seen this backpack and it's $20. And so I'm going to save. And you keep, like making a big deal out of it. Would make a big deal when people came to visit. Oh, see how much she saved for the backpack. And they're like, okay, and what did you do? And I did this chore and I did this chore. And then when they made that goal, would make another big deal about, let's go spend your money, and would take the money in the envelope. I still remember this lady was so nice to us. We go to the store and I explained to her, at the checkout, she's spending her own money. She's picked her own backpack. And so the lady was like, okay, let's count. I mean, the pride on their faces, it's like, I did this. I achieved a goal. And it's true, those backpacks were never thrown on the floor. They had like special places because they spent their own money. And so we continued, and it was finding teachable moments. So always be on the lookout. You go to the ATM, money comes out of the ATM. That's an ideal time. The reason money comes out of there, because I put my money in there, 4 weeks ago, so I'm able to take money out. So just keep finding all these teachable moments. And part of it is going to be your value system. And trust me, they'll understand. And then, like I said, you can see the progression that we made from what my daughter wrote. So it can be done, absolutely. And keep telling them stories of how you grew up.
That's awesome. So is this like a live blog post?
Yeah, I'll send you a
Okay.
link.
That's
so
awesome.
I used to maintain a blog, but I killed it at some point where I basically wrote for like 3, 4 years on all the things I was doing to teach my kids. Again, it's all this teachable moment. But yeah, I'll send you the link to the post that she wrote on how we learned about money.
I had a lot more that I want to talk about. I think we've covered a lot today for an episode. So I really thank you for your time and willingness to stay extra time, almost double the time, actually.
I'll be happy to come back.
So yeah, we can come back in
yeah.
for sure and cover some additional topics. So anyways, it's been an incredible conversation. Thank you for being generous with your time and sharing your journey. Hopefully we can invite you again and continue this conversation. To all of our listeners, thank you for spending your time with us today. Please don't forget to subscribe to show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And that's it for today. Thanks again for listening. I'm Elise. Until next time, stay unmuted.